Intangible, speaking for the unspoken. Born in Michigan, July 24, 1969, she looked to the stars as a child and discovered more than comfort in the silence. Abuse creates the recluse, and her environment made her run. September 23, 2022, it stopped her in her tracks. She had collected enough puzzle pieces, and her time to make the intangible tangible was now upon her. They only make statues of crazy people. I'll take that challenge. Just as there are readers and writers, there are the religious and the spiritual. What some may call God, consciousness, universe, or true self, I call it life. From divine predictions to bilocation and everything in between, life leaves clues to guide us on our journey. I recall choosing this lifetime, knew it would be difficult, but knew it would be worth it. Within is the best place to be. Here is my story. Dedicated to those of us too afraid to speak of all the unspoken. True self-love, the courage to surrender to believing, leads to happiness, love, and joy, and brings forth gratitude and grace with the discovery of your true self. Carl Jung once said, "To be normal is the ideal aim for the unsuccessful." Welcome. You are reading this because something inside drew you to it, and you're quietly looking for answers. As a recluse, or as much as one can be these days, I understand preferring the quiet over the noise, and believe in some way this will help you discover some pieces of the puzzle that we all seek. Being one who is spiritual, I feel it's unfortunate we've been led to believe what we need is outside of us somewhere. I feel it started hundreds, if not thousands, of years ago in an attempt to control the spread of the unknown, the intangible knowledge within. I also feel the discoveries shared in those days were considered beyond the comprehension of those in control, and that fear of the unknown pushed them to contain the knowledge being shared to retain such control. Perpetuating an incomplete storyline has done humanity few favors, and I'm glad we're now in a phase of progress where nothing is left off the table, but sought after, to understand the possibilities of ourselves. That noted, we are also amidst a series of serious incomplete storylines globally being manipulated once again and quite openly. It's an interesting time to exist, to say the least. Many have tried deciphering what others have said by using our brain, our opinion, logic, and written word to form something that will appease the ego. In contrast, I have been regularly placed in environments where I did not care for the outside world or their ego and chose the inside world instead, because it showed me early on the love and peace and joy I quickly grew to long for. My outside world was void of such things, and the knowledge I had to share was dismissed. Their logic made no sense to me. They say nothing good comes easy. So I was woven with stubborn determination, which helped me dodge and weave my way through life. With my own experiences quietly in hand, a teacher taught us the difference between tangible and intangible, and I immediately knew I would make the intangible tangible. That was my soul's challenge for me. Early experiences led me to discover science, and I took all the science courses offered: biology, zoology, chemistry, and physics. I even took entomology 1 year in 4-H and received top 10, the highest award offered. That's how other things progressed. I try, succeed to my satisfaction, and move on. However, I was not interested in how the human body functioned. In science, theories are ideas to be proven, and always being curious, I took this theory on as my own personal mission to prove. It was only one piece of my puzzle in this game we call life. I like to believe we all have our own forever memories, left deep inside each of us, as I do, and that those are there to help guide us on our own journeys and to our purposes in relationships, career, and spiritually in this lifetime. What follows is a collection of threads, emotionally and gently pulled from a few of my forever memories. I tried to focus on the experiences that included the mystical because it's what has drawn me to it my entire life. From toddling in my diaper barefoot through the snow to visit the elderly woman across the yard, to where I am now, some 50 plus years later. Curiosity of what is out there is innate, and I feel it's up to those of us who are aware to help guide that curiosity in the right direction. Our journey should begin from within. Leg bone. Point me in a direction and I will go. That's how I felt in 1974 about walking by myself the 2 blocks from my house to kindergarten as I watched for each segment of sidewalk that was raised by a tree root so I didn't trip. I suppose even then I was always looking where I was stepping versus where I was headed. One step at a time. Uphill was fine because it took me away from where I was, and even before that house, I looked for any reason to not be at home. Deep in my own thoughts, I'm sure I walked right by the road that school was on a time or two. I feel I entered this life into an emotional void. Kids were to be seen and not heard, was the old adage, and don't play your games with me, whatever that meant, were common to hear in our house. There was no love, no hugs, no teaching, as one might expect. In fact, it was quite the opposite, and I constantly wanted to get away. At that age, there was nothing I could do but remove myself from them and any situation that arose, whenever possible. And I suppose not being able to talk to the adults kept me from telling what was going on. I tried talking to other adults I saw a couple times a year to get to know them, but even they only sat me in front of something to keep me quiet. Out of sight, out of mind. This was the programming for any life expectations instilled into me. That same year, my mom and stepdad decided they wanted to build a house versus rent and bought a 4.5 acre vacant field in the country from our very nice and genuine elderly neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Settlemyer. One summer day, I went with my stepdad to the new property to check on the progress of the house. While he was looking into the 8 to 10 foot deep hole they dug for the basement, I went to play on the dirt mounds left by the excavator. There were some stones and fist-sized rocks in there. Then something caught my eye and I ran downhill to pick it up. I instantly knew this bone was human. Although my little head quickly ran through images of deer, cow, and horse bones, most likely to be in the area, trying to find any answer for something different, I kept coming back to a human leg bone, and I knew it was Indian or Native American. Excited and thinking it was a really cool find, I took it to my stepdad to show him what I'd found. He might think it was cool also. He took it in his hands and examined it, then asked where I found it. I turned and pointed to the base of the dirt pile, and when I turned back around, the bone was no longer in his hands. I didn't like this surprise and asked where my bone was. He told me he threw it back in the hole, pointing to the southwest corner. No! My soul screamed inside. I demanded to know where he threw it at, and when he told me, I immediately headed to the edge of the hole to retrieve it. That's not where it goes, I sternly advised him. It goes over there, and then pointed to the northwest side of the hole. It irritated me that he threw my find in the hole, but now I needed to put it back where it belonged, and my 5-year-old self was determined to do just that. At that point, he pulled me back and told me it was too deep and I couldn't go in to retrieve it. After we moved in, they bought us 2 cats, Tinkerbell and Tiny, I suppose for company for my older sister and I. The cats lived in the basement and we lived upstairs. Needless to say, the cats were pretty wild, and I don't know what happened to them, but they were removed within a short time. I don't think either of us were very interested in them, but I recognized they were trying to give us something to keep us occupied since we were miles away from town, in the country, way back from the road, all alone in our little world. It didn't take long for us to realize there may have been another reason why the cats were wild. There was something creepy about that basement, specifically behind the stairs. If you could make it down the stairs without running down the open stairwell, the main area and to the left felt like a normal basement. When we were told to go play in the basement, it felt like punishment. But they put our things down there, so we'd have no choice. The laundry room was to the right, and the water softener was to the right of that, behind the stairs. Our things were put to the right of the water softener in the next room, and it felt less creepy there. My older sister was most scared, and I always tried to protect her by going first and walking boldly behind the stairs to let her know there was nothing there, but I felt it, and felt it allowed me to pass. However, when I had to go down there alone, it didn't want me to leave and would reach through the open steps at my ankles. I learned to skip steps, running up 2 steps at the same time to get past the grabby part and slamming the door behind me. My sister did the same and avoided the basement at all costs. When I was about 9 or 10, 1978 or 79, my older sister and her friends had a sleepover and performed a test in the main part of the basement where it felt safer to see if there was a spirit down there. They lifted one of the girls who was laying on the floor with 2 fingers from each hand underneath her by repeating, "Light as a feather, stiff as a board." I didn't attend, but I do recall that much of the story, and it confirmed to me once again that bone belonged to someone. I decided to have my friends over and do a seance of our own, as one of my friends, Stacy, lived in front of a cemetery and sometimes played with a Ouija board to communicate with the local dead. We sat in a circle in the laundry room, just 8 feet or so from the hot spot by the water softener. One of the girls, Sharon, was trying to call in the spirit while we sat with our eyes closed, willing the spirit to join us. Suddenly, Sharon stopped talking. I opened my eyes to see what she was doing and saw her face glowing a pale white in the near darkness and looking straight between my best friend and myself. Without moving my head, I allowed my eyes to follow her awestruck stare. Others in the circle still had their eyes closed, but as my eyes moved towards my best friend, that's when I saw him. Wet, sweaty or greasy, long, dark hair, middle-aged, sun-leathered, tanned face with wrinkles, with a red cloth around his forehead like a headband, but I couldn't tell if it was colored red or blood-soaked. Regardless, he just hovered there, between Kirsten and myself, slightly higher than our own heads. I felt as if he were sad, yet had simply and stoically joined our circle. I had the feeling he too just wanted to belong. Maybe that's why he was trying to grab my ankles when I went up the stairs, but not when I went down, I pondered to myself. I now had a face to go with the hands we'd felt on our ankles and the bone that was in my hand. Others started to open their eyes as well. Some saw him, others saw how the blood had drained from Sharon's already pale face and jumped up to check on her. "Did you see it?" she kept repeating, clearly in shock. "Yes, Sharon, we saw him. He did good." Shortly afterwards, as quite intentional punishment for telling of the things being done to her, my older sister's bed was moved from her bedroom to the basement. In the same spot in the laundry room, the spirit had shown his face to me and my friends. She was panicked and frantically kept trying to get me to do something, but there was nothing I could do except remove myself from the chaos. Within days, she moved out to go live with her 9th grade English teacher and her family to finish high school. I was happy for her to be out. First visitors. My bedroom faced south, overlooked part of the front yard and the 1,000 pine tree saplings we'd planted, 100 each of 10 species. The window was to the right of my bed, which allowed me to stand on my toes on the windowsill with hands against the inside trim. I was about 6 or 7 years old, 1975 or 76, and short with a small frame. I fit inside it and enjoyed looking into the black sky at night, as I could see every star. I often wondered what was out there. It had to be different than here. "Take me away," I silently pleaded in my head. I remember standing there as long as I could. The first time he visited, I watched it play out, emotionless, like a movie I was captivated by. To say there was a small flying saucer type spaceship, roughly at a 3-to-1 ratio width versus height, with legs that didn't seem to touch the ground, would be reasonably accurate. It was aglow with a light blue color that lit up the front yard beneath it, but didn't quite reach my window. There was no sound and no vibration. It simply was. A stairwell opened from the right side of the ship, and a small human-type figure descended to the left and stood beneath it, looking straight at me. The figure appeared to be that of a child, maybe my age, but lacking the details of a human, as if in a one-piece, light blue fitted and footed pajama, the kind I enjoyed wearing, except mine was fuzzy and his was smooth. I was mesmerized as I stood in my window, both of us staring, not as if waiting for something to happen. It was more of a tranquil knowing. No words were ever spoken between us, either audibly or inside my head. Looking back, I don't believe he was there to talk, but he instilled a beautiful, warm, joyful, loving peace inside me when there was none. I considered him my friend, and he visited me like this at least 6 or 7 times during that year or two, seemingly whenever my heart called for him, and I would simply stand in the window to wait. One time he visited, his parents also descended the stairs and stood beside him to the right. First the father, then the mother. They were both about the same height and slightly taller than my friend. They also stood just as he did, looking straight at me, between him and the stairs. But that wasn't the only thing that was different on this visit. His parents were unified in mind, the same way my friend instilled beauty and joy into my chest. However, unlike my friend, they were able to bring me through the window and across the yard to stand before them. I felt as if I were assessed, but was unconcerned. I then recall turning my head to the right and looking at the stairs where a bright white light blocked me from seeing beyond, but felt myself moving toward it. Not walking, just moving, as if gliding effortlessly. I recall stopping and looking up, seeing windows on the second story of the spaceship with another figure, the same but not related, looking out at me. It felt quite welcoming and normal, like recognizing someone, but still emotionless. I do not fully know if I entered the ship or simply turned around, but my next recollection was being or standing peacefully back in front of his parents again. My friend was still to their left, but unlike my friend, his parents spoke inside my head as one combined voice, indistinguishable as male or female. If you tell anyone, we cannot come back. This struck me as odd because I'd never told anyone of the visits before. It made me wonder if I was supposed to, or was this a test? I didn't exactly talk to anyone anyway, but this time was different and I found it intriguing. That morning, I walked into the dining room where my mother was getting ready to sit down with her coffee at the table. As she stood there, I told her about the visits from my friend and of his parents visiting, but with every word I wanted to speak, it was met with resistance as if my friend's parents' words were in my head, keeping me from saying the next word out loud. And once I finally managed to get the last word out, the resistance stopped. And I knew in that moment I had broken their request. I recall my mother telling her friend Helen about my imaginary friend. Helen's daughter, Geraldine, apparently had one also, but not like mine. It instantly angered me, as she clearly didn't listen to what I said. Why would you call him imaginary? I sternly corrected her, saying, he's not imaginary, but she, true to form, ignored me and dismissed me from the room. Unfortunately, that was also the last time I saw my friend and his parents. Telling about them was my promised punishment, and that hurt worse than anything anyone else could do to me.